there's something that I can't quite understand, and that is, why are learning and school not synonymous with each other? Why is learning not the same as studying? Why is studying often joked as studying? These are all questions that I've begun to think about and ask since graduating from high school 5 years ago. Some other questions include, why do we reserve things that we actually like to do outside of school or outside of the classroom? And also, why do we not want to learn something if it's not on the test? And I was very guilty of this. As soon as something was labeled special interest or optional, that was a clear sign to not study it. And all of these questions started popping up in my head after reading Seth Godin's Linchpin and listening to his podcast Akimbo. He's always trying to ask what is something for, so in this case, what is education for? In Linchpin, which I've also made a blog post about, which I will link below, Seth basically mentions that society now is looking for workers who are indispensable, who are creative and can think outside of the box. But he also argues that through things like schooling and through society, we're brought up to learn obedience, to follow the rules, and basically to trade our inner creativity for a standardized system. What Seth believes, and what I realize I believe as well, is that schooling and education should be for teaching the skills to be an indispensable worker or a linchpin. This is about teaching leadership in schools, because beyond school, people are looking for creativity instead of things like obedience and being book smart. Looking back at my education, I realized that I really didn't enjoy studying or school that much, and am definitely not as passionate about it as I am today. Back then, I'd come home and wouldn't read books or anything remotely related because they reminded me of studying. But for some reason, while I really disliked writing essays in school, now I'm finding myself writing in some form every single day because that's what I'm doing with my blog and YouTube. But I'm also researching a lot of different topics and reading more non-fiction books for my own interests than ever before. Especially with my background in STEM, I've experienced firsthand of the need to memorize and memorize. We had to remember all the pathways, like the Krebs cycle, but we didn't actually know why we needed to. But because it was on the test, we just did it. And now I'm realizing more and more that education is sort of like a game, that you'll succeed if you know how to play the system and learn in a way that gets good grades. In Year 12 chemistry, our teacher, who was absolutely incredible and she wanted only the best for us, she taught us how to answer questions in a certain way to get marks. Because if you stuffed up the wording of your answer and didn't hit the key words that they wanted, you wouldn't get any marks. And really all this was teaching us was the skill of how to do that test correctly or in the way that the system wanted us to. And there's a really great line in Linchpin that I want to share with you, and that is, being good at school is a fine skill if you intend to do school forever. Meaning that even if we ace school and we do amazingly on the tests, that doesn't actually set us up for real life. And now I know for many of us, we have so much trouble remembering what we even learnt in school. Because for the sake of a test, we'd memorize and cram as much as we could, only for the content that we would be tested on, and then forget it shortly after. We'd grow up not wanting to do badly on tests or to fail a test, so we'd do whatever was necessary to get a good enough grade, which was to remember theory and rote memorize. So an issue I have, especially with STEM tests, is that they're testing our memorization skills instead of application skills. And when we're asked to solve a problem, all we need to do is slightly attempt it and then check the model answer in the textbook. So basically everything is given to the students. And I can admit that a lot of the times now, I just want to know the answer and I don't want to go through the hard work of trying to solve a problem that may not be solved. It's a skill we've really developed in school, but in real life, there is no model answer from a textbook that we can find all our answers to. And I know that it looks like I hate the education system and it's awful and negative and everything. It's not. It's doing okay-ish, but I'm just finding things that could be improved. So other things that I think need improving in order to adapt to the future include that we make students fit into an average, standardized way of testing. Because students are all taught and graded in the exact same way, I really don't think it's a surprise that students think that they're not maths people or they're not, English people, etc. I personally was a little bit slower at learning maths, so, when a teacher would call up on me in class, I would probably not have solved the problem because I needed time outside of the classroom to actually figure it out. And because I was understanding things slower than other people in my class, I really felt like I wasn't smart enough or that I just wasn't a maths person. But every student is different, but this difference is rejected through something like a bad grade. And then this only demotivates the student further and makes them think that they're not good at the subject. It's not that we're not smart or not capable, it's that the class is moving at a different pace to us and that the content is being taught in a way that is not best suited towards us. And this concept of a standardized grade can be extended to things like your final Year 12 exam mark, which is your ATAR. This mark is not a reflection of how smart you are, it's just a comparison or a standardization of you to other students in Victoria. So people from low socioeconomic status think they're not smart, but really they just don't have the resources and the methods of teaching that suit them to win at the game of an ATAR. So in response to standardized tests, I personally don't think that there is an average or an average student, and I have a really good example to share. So in the American Air Force, they wanted to find the perfect sized cockpit for their pilots to be seated in. And they tested 4,000 or more than 4,000 pilots with their dimensions to find the perfect average. But then when they actually got the pilots back in to test it, it actually fit no one. So the message was that if you've designed a cockpit to fit the average pilot, you've actually designed it to fit no one, because there was no such thing as an average pilot. We should be personalizing education to each student. And to do that, we could be, making grading scales based on each individual student, so an A for one student is not the same for another. The second thing that really needs improving in the education system is the definition of leadership in school. Because while the badge and the title is nice, it doesn't actually reflect captaincy and leadership. And in my school environment, it was really seen that captains were leaders and that other students without a title were basically not leaders. But really, we should be treating every student like a leader, with or without the badge. We should be getting students to solve difficult real-life problems, and we could do that by bringing Model UN as a normal thing, where you get a scenario that's similar to a real-life situation, and you have to work together as a team to provide solutions to the problem. So school should really be about developing initiative, being able to solve interesting problems, and embrace failure, and all of these skills that leaders have. And it's very easy to be critical of the system and just point at what's wrong about it. So I've sort of just given some ideas of how it could be improved. With number 1, start young and teach children skills of leadership such as independence, creativity, and active learning. In my blog post, I mentioned that I volunteered at a childcare for a day, and these children who were very young did not want to sit down and listen to a story being read to them. So one of my suggestions that I actually thought of after, so it wasn't helpful in the moment, but it was to get the kids to create their own story instead of listening to someone read it out to them and perform it to the class. This teaches them creativity and active learning and everything that should be developed in order to become a leader. Another suggestion is to get students to answer questions without an answer. So basically getting more of those Model UN scenario things in, just to get their minds thinking and to answer without knowing for sure if they're right or wrong. And my last suggestion, get students to do more projects. These projects could span the whole year and get students to apply their thinking to real life situations or whatever. And I know that these suggestions are not, original and not something that other people haven't thought of already. But, I just thought I might share them anyway. Okay, so that was a lot of information to get through, and I hope you're still with me and surviving. I really hope that what I've said has struck something in you, or if it's just slightly relatable, that's all I want, and to get us all thinking about the same things. Okay, I think I'm done. See you in the next video. Bye!